welcome to the Teaching Corner. Today I have my very first guest. This is Margo Buisson, and I know her as the best sign language teacher in the world, but I want her to introduce herself and tell you about what she does.
Okay, hi. First, I'm not a teacher. I have taught, but I am not a teacher. That is, I'm a sign language interpreter. I'm an American sign language interpreter, and probably a new vocabulary word for some of you. I'm also a transliterator, which we'll get into that later. But American Sign Language and deaf folks and deaf culture are my passion, and I've been doing this for about 40 years now. I've interpreted and worked with deaf people. Pretty much you name the situation, from court to jail to police, mental health, medical, surgery, emergency room, university setting, interpreting, kindergarten setting, interpreting educationally, and every grade in between, except 7th and 8th grade. I refused that job and gladly took the kindergartners.
So that actually brings up a really good question for me. In what situations is an interpreter required by law?
Oh, well, historically that has changed.
Okay.
In the 1970s, there was the Rehabilitation Act, and that laid the groundwork for requiring interpreters in a lot of government settings. And when I say government settings, that also includes any place that accepts government funds. Mm-hmm. So that's a lot of places. That's all of your state government, your federal government, your state government, your local government, your school districts, hospitals. If you take Medicare or Medicaid, that's federal money. And so anywhere that gets any kind of federal funding was included in the Rehabilitation Act. And then later, the Americans with Disabilities Act, that came into play in the 1990s. And that pretty much reinforced all the things that were already covered with the Rehabilitation Act, but also added private businesses. If they make more than a certain amount of money in a year, they're required. And if you make less than that, it's not that you're not required, it's that there's a way for your accountant to take that tax deduction for what you did, not only for interpreters, but for anything that you do for a disabled person to be able to have equal access. So your ramps, your bathroom modifications, your parking lot, Braille, and sign language interpreters. Those are all part of different titles in the Americans with Disabilities Act. So the only places that are not required by law to have sign language interpreters are churches are not required by law because the federal government cannot make laws that govern churches. Even nonprofits, if they make more than that cutoff amount, legally are required to provide sign language interpreters. And that's a biggie that a lot of places, and the deaf person cannot be billed for that. And insurance doesn't pay for that. Medicare doesn't pay, Medicaid, no private insurance. This is a business expense that comes out of your business. It's part of what you do. You pay your electric bill and you pay for these accommodations.
So how, if I was a deaf person going to one of those places of business or going to my doctor, they don't necessarily know I'm coming. So how would I ensure that I have those services available for me?
It's incumbent upon the person with the disability, whatever their disability, to tell where they're going, this is what I need. That responsibility goes back to, so for a deaf person, the responsibility is on the deaf person to say, I have a doctor's appointment with Dr. Smith, and I'm going to need a sign language interpreter. And then if the doctor's office says, we don't do that, then the deaf person can educate or can give them information where they can get more information and become educated. Most medium to large cities now are familiar enough that they know how to get a sign language interpreter. They might try to say that they don't, but that's a whole other issue. But the deaf person is supposed to be able to say, I'm deaf, I use sign language, and I need a sign language interpreter.
Okay. So one of the questions when we had talked about doing this that I wanted to talk about as a teacher in the school setting and to help parents and teachers, what are some things that you as an interpreter, if my child, well, first of all, if my child is deaf or hard of hearing, how do I determine whether or not my child needs an interpreter? Like what is that process?
Well, when they're an infant, a toddler, they don't need a sign language interpreter because they don't know language. But there are other programs that can come in. Sky High and other states have different names for it, where you can access those services where they actually come into the home and educate the parents. And those professionals also can teach the beginnings of sign language to the parents, because the parents at that point are the first educators. They're the ones that are with the kids all day, every day. If grandma's the one who keeps them, that can be done there. Once they're 3 years old, then they can start within the school district. Their local school district is then required to provide the services. And they may not be ready for a sign language interpreter, but a teacher of the deaf. And that teacher of the deaf could then teach them sign language. So, and then by the time they're in kindergarten, first grade, if they have the language level, I've interpreted in kindergarten, where it was deaf and hard of hearing kids being mainstreamed, which now is inclusion, into a regular education kindergarten. And they fully participated in the kindergarten program at that school. And, you wear clothes that are appropriate for kindergarten and you get down on the floor and you have to be willing to do that. So being a professional interpreter, you have to know your limitations and be willing to do what the situation requires. But it really, when you need a sign language interpreter, is going to depend on when that child learns sign language and how much sign language they know.
Gotcha. So as speaking to parents as an interpreter, what are some things that you wish that parents knew about what it is that you do?
The number one thing is that sign language and learning sign language and using sign language is in no way a crutch. Other professionals will disagree with me, but I have never seen sign language prevent anyone from using any other mode of communication that they were going to learn, that they were going to use. If anything, it gives you a way to teach that other mode of communication. So whether it's speech reading or even using their hearing aid better, using their cochlear implant better, and utilizing all of those other parts of communication, reading and writing,
Mhm.
even. If you can use American Sign Language as a tool and a language
Mhm.
to teach those other skills, it is not a crutch, and it will not prevent, it will only enhance not only your child's schooling, but your home life,
Mhm. Mhm.
because that child will be less frustrated,
Mhm.
and you as parents will be less frustrated if you're willing to learn that language.
And I would say, as a teacher for the deaf and hard of hearing, what my experience has been is that sign language, when I would sign with a student, it aided in comprehension. It helped them get the bigger picture, because if they were speech reading, of course, we know that with speech reading, some kids are only getting 40% of what they're reading on somebody's lips. So it helps with comprehension. It helps with and even speech sounds, like if I'm trying to work on a particular, if they can't articulate it, and I'm using a sign so that they can understand a particular speech sound, so they can produce it. So I've never seen it in that way be a hindrance. I've always seen it. And in my experience too, if a kid could say it, they did, because they want to be like other kids, and so.
Well, and they want to please their teacher, the therapist, whoever it is. They
Right.
want that positive feedback.
Right.
So, and what you said about 40%, if you have to also understand is that the best speech readers, who are adults, who have been exposed to the English language their entire life, might be able to get 40% if they know the subject, they know the person, there's no background noise, there's no visual distractions, if everything is perfect,
Right.
40 or 50%. But you can't expect a child who has a very limited language base
Right.
to
That much.
understand, yeah, 40%.
And if you
So,
go and strike out 60% of the words in a passage and try to comprehend that, like, there's no way. So it's amazing to me that they're even able to figure out kind of what's going on, because it's like, if you take out.
or 60% of each word
That's
in that
true. Very
passage,
true. Yeah. 60%.
because
I never
they
thought
may
about it
not
that
be
way.
able to hear any of the S's.
Right. Right.
So if you take all the S's out of your language, it's very difficult. Just that one sound, because it's a high frequency sound. It's very difficult to understand. So the other thing that I want parents, especially parents with young children, to understand is that American Sign Language is a language.
Mhm.
It's not watered down English. It's not backwards English. It's not bad English. It
Mhm.
is a legitimate language. It has its own grammar. It has its own syntax. It stands alone. It has no actual written form, but it is a language.
Mhm.
Just as much as English is a language and Spanish is a language and any other language, American Sign Language is a full language. The other thing I would say is that if you, the sooner you can communicate with your child as a parent, the sooner you can bond and the more deeply you can bond with your child
Mm.
as a parent.
Mm.
I have two boys, they can both hear perfectly. They have no problems in with speech or their hearing or anything like that, but both of them knew sign language before they could speak.
Mhm. Mine as well,
Bef-
with my boys.
Before, but my older son, by the time he was 9 months old, he could tell you if he wanted water or milk
Mhm.
or applesauce or oatmeal.
I think I wrote down, and my oldest had like 50 words at age 1. The vast majority of them were signed. I think he could only say about 10 of those. The vast majority of them were sign language, but I mean, how much less frustrated was he, because he could tell me exactly what he wanted?
Yes. exactly, exactly. And physically, a child at that age can't say every sound. And their signs might be baby signs because they don't have fine motor communication, but it's understandable.
Mhm.
Just like if they say wah wah, you understand that means water.
Right.
Their version, sign language version, might not look like water. It might look like this instead of this, but you understand with use that, oh, and then it becomes clearer as this, as they get older and they get better, just fine motor skills. But the other thing is, my kids could tell you what hurt and where it hurt. By the time they were a year old. I'm not talking about a year old, like almost 2. I'm talking about 12, 13 months old. They could say whether their ear hurt or their throat hurt or their tummy hurt or their toe hurt.
Right.
And how much less frustrating is that for them and for a parent? That alone.
Yeah, this
And
brings up
just
a great thing. I was watching a family on YouTube, and they recently found out that their child was deaf, and they have decided to go the cochlear implant route and are currently in the, you got to wear hearing aids for 6 months to see if that helps, prior to seeing whether or not they can have the cochlear implant. But one of the things that was that this father expressed was when they had gone to the audiologist, the audiologist told these parents not to sign with their son, because if they started with sign language, the child would become dependent on that and would not rely on his hearing for speech, and they wanted him to be able to speak. And in some subsequent videos, they have started learning sign language, and the whole family is trying to learn sign language to communicate with him. But I was so taken aback and frustrated, because when I first started over, 20 years ago, that was in the medical field what was said. And from an educational perspective, I feel like, communication is the most important thing. And you've got, I don't care if you speak, sign, use pictures, whatever, you've got to be able to communicate.
Sure.
And so just what is kind of your thoughts? Do you see medical professionals still saying that pretty widely? And then what is your thoughts on that?
Yes, unfortunately, I hear that from audiologists, from speech and language pathologists. I hear it from pediatricians. And for the cochlear implant, I hear that from Joe Blow on the street. I hear it from teachers. I hear it from doctors. I had a neurologist once tell a deaf adult, this is a man in his 40s, who's been deaf all of his life, and the neurologist, I was there to interpret for him and interpret for the doctor, because without me there, the doctor wasn't going to understand him as much as he wasn't going to understand the doctor. And I like to tell the doctors, I'm your interpreter today. And they go, oh, you're his. And I say, no, I'm your interpreter today. You're the one who hired me. And then they go, oh, okay. Yeah. I like to just kick that in there as a little reminder that they need me too. Right. But he asked me in front of this man who's an adult, and I signed everything he said, because that's my job, is to get that communication going. He asked me personally, why doesn't he just get those cochlear implants and then he could do this without you? And the man, first he said, he signed, what? And so I said, his response to your question to me is, what? So he would know, it wasn't me. This is, and he said, oh, you signed that to him? And so I signed that because, again, that's my job. And he, if I'm taking, he did this in front of the doctor's face and did this.
Yeah, look at me.
I said, look at me.
Right.
And, you know, and then he said, don't ignore me. I'm the patient. Talk to me. And the doctor was just taken aback. The doctor would, and afterward, the doctor was upset with me that I signed everything he said. But
they don't understand.
Cochlear implants do not make a person a hearing person.
Right.
Even if you are a good candidate for a cochlear implant, it requires years of training to be able to be successful, a successful user of cochlear implants. They help many people, but they do not help 100% of the people who get it. And they do not work like like glasses.
Right, right.
Okay, I'm very nearsighted. Without my contact lenses or without my glasses, everything has to be right here for me to see it in focus. But once I put my glasses on, everything is in focus. Hearing aids and a cochlear implant don't work like that. You put on your hearing aids and you put in your cochlear implant, you're still missing parts.
Right.
And you're still not hearing like a hearing person, with a person with hearing in the average range of what is considered normal in hearing for a person who can hear. That's just not the way hearing aids and a cochlear implant work. And that's important for parents to understand. That I'm not saying that hearing aids are not important to learn to use. I'm not saying not to get a cochlear implant, but you have to know that they do not work like eyeglasses.
Right. And I think that's from an educational perspective, like for me, for them to say, don't sign, which means now your child is going to be language delayed because they're missing a year of language or however long it takes you to start signing, if you ever do sign with your child. And if you're only going to focus on speech, I was the teacher who would get the 5-year-old, the 6-year-old starting kindergarten with 0 language. So now I'm supposed to be teaching you how to read. I'm supposed to be teaching you content. We're supposed to be learning. And I'm starting with vocabulary because you don't know cat and ball and wait and play and outside and all of the things. And so for me, going back to it doesn't hinder language, I'm very much a both and. Yeah, speak to your child, sign to your child, use pictures. I don't care.
Right.
Communicate with your child, because that baby cannot tell you whether or not they're going to, with cochlear implants, have good speech. Right. There's no way to know. And like you said, it's like a 5-6 year process before they have that good speech. So, oh my goodness, what are we doing with language in between?
In the meantime,
Yeah. So that for me is a little heartbreaking when I hear that this is still prolifically being said. And it's frustrating because I don't know why it is, but sometimes my profession is not seen as high as a medical professional. And
absolutely,
so
yes.
They don't look at as a teacher, even though I have a master's degree, they don't look at me as high as a doctor. So if the doctor says don't sign, and the teacher says, oh, but you should sign, they're going to listen. I feel like most of the time they listen to the doctor over me.
Sure.
So
yes. And we want people to be able to trust their doctors.
Absolutely.
We do.
They see it from a medical perspective that there's something wrong and we're fixing what's wrong. We're giving you a device that's going to change it. And through all this therapy and time, you'll be able to hear, maybe not normal, but you'll be able to hear and function. So, I do understand the medical side of it. But from an educational and a language side of it, I feel like that's a detriment.
And I'm not deaf, but I've worked with many deaf people. And there's a woman, she's my age. We've been friends since I was a student in 1980 at Delgado Community College. And she's deaf, and her parents chose the oral-aural route when she was very young and drove several hours every day round trip to bring her to this special oral school where they did not allow any signing. And she had intensive speech therapy every single day that she was there, 5 days a week. And her parents did not sign with her, and they did everything that the audiologist and the therapist told them to do. And she was about 9 years old, and she happened to be in a grocery store with her mom, and there was a deaf couple there, and they were signing with their hearing children. And it caught her eye immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And that day, the mom wound up talking to these parents, writing notes back and forth with this deaf couple,
Right.
and finding out, and the deaf mom was trying to communicate with my friend who knew no sign language. She would point and gesture, but she didn't know any language, American Sign Language. And through the process of this whole conversation, this deaf mom had my friend understand the sign for mother, because her mom was right there. And she was saying, Mom, she signed for mother with her own kids, and then pointing to my friend's mom and with her, and she was 9 years old.
Mm-hmm.
She had been in speech therapy from the time she was 4 or 5 years old. She had learned mama, mama, mama in speech therapy. But until that day, she did not put together that what she was saying, mama, mama, meant mother.
Oh, that gives me chills.
9 years old.
Yeah.
When she said she felt like that day, that happenstance in the grocery store, she said it's like the floodgates opened up. All of a sudden, she wanted to know the signs. And the mom was crying, her mom was crying, the other mom was crying, my friend is crying, it's just, and from that point on, she started learning sign language. And her mom started learning sign language, and they became very close for the rest of their lives. They were very, very close and learned sign language together. And, it wound up as a happy story.
Mm-hmm.
This friend of mine now has her master's degree in social work and deaf ed, and does mission work all across the world as a missionary, helping deaf kids across the world and missionaries to work with kids who are deaf and hard of hearing across the world. But it started when she was 9 years old.
Speaking of that, since you do interpret for a wide range of ages, deaf adults who went the oral-aural route and didn't learn sign language, are they good with that? Are they happy with that? Do they wish that they had learned some sign language younger? Do they wish their families had learned some?
I can honestly say that of all the deaf and hard of hearing people that I work with who started off dependent on oral-aural communication and then later learned sign language, every single one of them wishes that they had started learning sign language from the beginning. Not that they would not have done what they can do with their oral communication, but for understanding, they wish they had learned sign language, and they wish their families had learned sign language, and they wish they'd have been around other people who knew sign language.
Right.
Because very often it's a very lonely place in school to be the one deaf kid,
Right.
and everybody else in the grade or in the school can hear. You're the one kid who can't hear, and it's a very lonely place. And especially if your language is very limited, it's even more lonely.
So that brings up a question I hadn't even thought about, but as an itinerant teacher and having different models in different districts, I've been in the model where, I traveled to all of the home schools of the children. And then I've been in the model where there was a cluster school where several, this was the middle school that all of the students that were deaf or hard of hearing came to, and they had interpreters and a teacher for the deaf on campus. What is your feeling about that? Or
I think that for very young deaf children, if they can be with other people who are like them,
mhm,
for whatever, every kid wants to be with people who are like them, who, like the same things. Oh, I like bugs. You like bugs. I like throwing the ball. You like throwing the ball. I like painting. Whatever it is, kids like to be with other kids who like to do the same things that they like to do. And then as they get older and they develop personalities, it might change some. So I think that it is important for very young deaf children to be around other deaf children, but also I think it's really important for young children to be with deaf adults, is maybe not on a daily basis, but if they're clustered together, it's a little easier for the teacher of the deaf or the speech language pathologist to have a deaf person come in once a month, once
right.
every 2 weeks.
So they can
Who
see
that
that.
deaf adult might be a teacher,
Mhm,
they might be might do manual labor,
mhm,
build houses, plumber, electrician. They could be a doctor. They could be a nurse. They could be a lawyer. They
right,
could just, you name it, there are deaf people who do it.
right, right.
Um, they could be a hairdresser. And as a young child, seeing deaf adults who are successful can
Mhm.
change a child's mindset.
Yeah, so important.
And for young children's parents, it's important for them to see successful deaf adults,
Mm,
because often what limits a child, and for the teachers who don't know about deafness, for them to see successful deaf adults, because parents and teachers can often limit what a child does and what the end result is for that child, because they don't see the potential in that child. They
right,
see it's a very narrow, and they have blinders on. They just see what is right now, and they
right,
can't see 20, 25 years from now. Have a college student who happens to be deaf come in and talk to the kids
right.
and share their experience. Have deaf people who are parents come in
Mm,
and talk to the parents
about what it's like raising.
and the kids.
Mhm,
I think that is a huge area that's lacking.
mhm,
Deaf athletes.
mhm.
So many times, the children who are deaf, who are not at the schools for the deaf, but are either cluster schools or spread out, however, very often they miss out on opportunities, forensics teams, athletic teams, the math team, the tennis team, whatever it is, they miss out on that because for one thing, there's no other deaf kid in those
Right,
activities, so they don't think they can do it.
right,
And
right.
nobody's saying, yeah, look at so and so. He's plays for the NFL, for the Denver Broncos. You
Mhm,
want to play football? You can be like him.
mhm.
It, th-
Right.
there's just so much out there, and deaf kids and their parents and their teachers often
Mhm.
are just, they're in the little bubble of what's going on now instead of saying what could be for the future.
Well, again, I just appreciate you getting on here so much and sharing all of your years of wisdom with us. And I hope that was helpful. If it was, please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you later. Bye.